should say recording in the top. Thanks.
Sherry,
We lost. Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's my internet being. Sorry, yeah, it should be all right. It can be a bit sketchy, my internet. Right, I guess this is everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. So I'm just going to put the link to our survey in the chat. In case you haven't seen it already, if people could fill that out, that would be amazing, but not, you know, you don't have to. So what we've been thinking about, and we were actually thinking about this before the pandemic, COVID sort of happened, it's kind of a response to Brexit, but also just mainly a response to wasting loads of time and carbon driving to London to see a show, even just London, you know, let alone traveling around Europe, to see a show that, you know, it's unlikely that we would book in the end because, you know, 1 in 20 shows that we see, we kind of might be interested in booking. So we were thinking, I just basically had said to Adrian at Jackson's Lane quite a few times, can you just please live stream me the shows, kind of jokingly, and we'd never done it. But that's basically what we want to try and do. With that comes actually quite a lot of thinking about showcasing, about how to make showcasing a great experience for artists and for programmers. What's important, what can we get rid of, what works digitally and what doesn't. So the survey is very short, and it's just trying to get an impression of what is important to people. Some people, we're getting some great responses, you know, generally people don't like speed dating, and generally, you know, people sort of feel like gathering feedback from programmers can be really difficult, and some people are very much people and they like having a chat in the bar and making connections that way, and some people are actually quite introverted, and you know, you don't have to be an extrovert to be an artist. I find it a bit of a shame sometimes that that's expected of you. I'm not very much of an extrovert, so it's quite hard as a programmer sometimes even just to chat to people all the time. I prefer to see work, and it will be about the work. So our project will develop, as I said, with 3 artists, companies presenting work however they can. It might be in a theatre, it might be in their garden, it might be in a training space, a safe space at the time that we can get the production values needed for them to present their work in. And we will share that as much as possible. But what I really would like this to be is the start of a new way of sharing work. It's not rocket science, it's just, you know, it's just filming and sharing that way, but it's filming live or as live. It's not waiting for a video to be made of a show or a trailer to be made of a show. It's seeing work that maybe isn't ready. It might be being invited to an R&D. It might be, you know, the showing of something that's just, you know, not a big premiere, like a small premiere. But as programmers, quite often I will program on the back of a showing for an R&D. Once a show is being premiered, it's quite often quite too late for us to decide whether that's the show that we want, because, you know, it's touring then, and we quite often program work that's very new, or just literally because you need to work, you know, 6 months in advance, you don't know if that show will still be on tour by the time you're seeing it on tour. So that process of seeing work in its early stages is really important, and I think if we spend a year not sharing work at that stage all over Europe, if that doesn't happen, then there will be a knowledge gap, and people who are programming for 2022 will not be up to date with what artists are doing. And I think especially in the UK, because our crisis is worse, and because of Brexit, because of visas, and because of cost of travel, I think the cost of travelling will go up a lot. I think there's a danger that we'll get left behind a bit, and we won't be able to keep the focus and sort of attention on the work that's being made in this country. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about all of that?
A quick question. Can you define?
Axel, hi love.
Hey. Can you define showcasing a bit?
I had an interesting talk to Stefan at Circus Strada about the word showcasing and what it means to different people, what it means across Europe as well. I decided to stick with it as a word because I think it has a level of professionalism attached to it. Some of the, he said that a showcase for him would be, he would see, the first thing he thinks of is maximum three extracts of work that a programmer might be interested in. The other kind of a very typical idea of showcasing might be more like a fringe model, so that you're showing work, to lots of bookers who are running around trying to see as much as possible. Or it might be more, a one-day event where you're speed dating and you're pitching and you're seeing lots of different work, and then you're going to see a show in the evening, and there's lots of kind of like networking and chances to talk in between. But I couldn't really coin another word. Because this project is in development and we are researching and developing as we go, we're not quite sure. It might be that it only works for quite polished finished work. It might be that it's actually only useful for R&D showings, because once something's polished and ready to share, then there are other artists will just make a video, or that it will get shown somewhere and people will see it. So it might only be that it's only good for sharing very new work or work in development with a select amount of people. Sorry, is that you, Bex? Have you got noise in the background? Can you mute yourself? Or someone's got someone talking in the background. That's better, thank you. Does that answer your question, Axel? What do you think? Yeah?
Yes.
Is it a funny word to use for you?
No. I think it's a great word. It's just that at the beginning, I wasn't quite sure if I was understanding the same thing as what you were teaching about. But yeah, definitely. That's all very clear.
I had an email from the Finnish circus organizer, a Finnish sort of sector support agency the other day, and they were talking about all the showcasing that they're going to be doing. They're still planning on taking artists, I think, to Canada in November, and it just made me feel like, that this gap might happen, and if there's not the impetus to be working on that in this country, then those avenues won't be open to us. Yes, Bex, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hey. Hi. Nice to see everybody.
See you.
So with the showcase, is this, how are you doing an open call for artists, or do you have or do you even have a set of a framework that artists can follow to film their work, or sorry, I've not read your survey, so I'm maybe a bit behind.
Yeah. If you read it, it might answer that a bit. But we're just writing the artist brief at the moment, and
okay.
we're not going to do an open call because the brief is evolving. As we learn more, we'll learn more about what we're doing. I also don't want to ask lots of artists to put lots of time into applying for something else, because there's so much of that going on at the moment. I don't want to raise expectations. And what we really need is we're not really sure at the moment. It might be that we have a very new project, something that is ready, much more ready to show, and basically something that was going to tour this summer but couldn't. I would quite like something small and ground-based, something aerial, and then something ensemble. But who is safe to work in an ensemble way at the moment? Besides, it's not an ensemble, but duets. A couple who live together and work together.
Yeah.
So the safety implications are really important to us. I don't want to be encouraging artists to work in an unsafe way. It feels really, really dodgy to dangle a carrot of a budget and exposure for your work with the kind of premise that you're working together, and actually that's not advisable. It might be that artists will, quarantine for 2 weeks before starting to start on their work again. So the brief is evolving. A big part of it is that whoever gets involved with it, that it's going to be quite a collaboration with us, because it's developing as we go. It might be a very simple stick a 360 camera in, and film it, and that might be quite straightforward. But if artists want to collect feedback, if they want to have a question and answer session afterwards, what kind of promoters they want to engage, maybe it's a piece of outdoor work and we have to kind of rethink it a bit, because that's not necessarily my main contacts, but I can reach that world quite easily. So, you know, how much we tailor it for each company. So there's going to be quite a bit of working together as it goes. And then also just an artist or company who we know will pull it off, basically. But then, you know, also running it with the idea that if a company doesn't get to the point where they present anything, then actually there's a lot of learning done within that.
Cool.
Yes, Axel.
And did you get some feedback from artists about presenting their work on video and how they feel about that? Because obviously live circus and on video is a completely different experience.
Yeah. So the idea with the project is that as programmers, we're used to watching videos of work, and actually quite often the most useful videos that you watch are quite bad, low-level recordings of a full-length show, because you don't want a jazzy trailer. You want a jazzy trailer to help sell the show to the artist, but if you can't see that show live, I want the closest experience that the audience is going to have. So the idea is that if 360 feels useful, that gives a better connection or more of a realistic audience experience, because you can watch different bits, you know, of the show and change your attention. It might not be useful, but if we do that, then the user experience might not be great resolution. So it's not going to be an audience. It's not going to be the level of user experience that we would want for an audience. What we're quite aware of as we think more and more through it, when I'm talking to 360 filming people about the light levels that they can handle, about the audio issues, is that the filming of the piece will be quite a consideration. And I don't want that to become the focus too much. I don't want that to impinge on the creative process of the work, and I don't want it to add too much stress to the presentation of the work, but it will have to be considered, because you don't want it to look rubbish and you don't want it to sound rubbish. But you know, so quite a lot of 360 things you see, what's interesting is when you put the camera right in the middle of the stage, so you have the artists around you, but we don't want that, because that's not the experience that programmers are trying to assess for their audiences. So I think as much as possible, we want a kind of, you know, third row back, center experience for an audience, the best view in the house kind of thing, so that you can feel that show as best as possible. But yeah, the filming of the piece, you know, the idea is that I would like it to be live, but if that's too risky, you know, if you're going to have technical issues, if, you know, there's too much, it might be nice that if you, you know, if something goes wrong in the show, you can just go cut and start again, you know. Unlike a real showcase, that might be a really nice way of taking out some of the risk for the artist. So it might be that it's more an as live experience that you've filmed beforehand, and then you share as a shared live experience with the programmers, so everyone's kind of watching it at the same time. So you have a live presentation, you have a live R&D and the question and answer session afterwards. But yeah, so the consideration of the filming is important, but I don't want it to turn into a circus for screen experience, because that's
okay.
not, it's very much rooted in, we want to get back to live programming in venues, and maybe that's a bit archaic now and we'll just get left behind, but that's kind of what we're pinning our hopes to.
I think you'll find by developing this platform alongside wanting, you know, everybody striving for the live again, we're going to become tech savvy creatively within that, you know, to explore new avenues with how we want to present or how we frame, how we view our work, like more, I guess, like cinematography, even set design, you know, all these kind of things are all going to be big things we've got to play into our work as we keep making, especially if social distance theatre is going to become more of a thing, you know, in the next few years. Yeah, I know for us, I've got a few projects on the boil, and one, you know, is kind of, we just received some money from the emergency fund from ACE, which is great because it's letting us continue R&D on this, but within this time. So like, you know, finding ways to continue researching and developing our ideas, and how we want to present it on what different platforms we want to kind of keep on pushing forward with it, so you don't lose the excitement and the energy of something, you know. It's like, it is really crucial. So I think it's great. Anything that just keeps us thinking is really great.
Yeah, I hope so. I think I see that kind of digital savvy approach as a kind of extension of the social media kind of understanding. You know, some artists are all over that, and you'll get loads of marketing happening for their piece, and they'll be kind of, you know, doing Instagram stories so that they kind of get in and things like this. But it's and it might be that the programmers, actually what they're looking for is work that has a digital aspect to it as well. So we'll incorporate that. It's going to be quite a journey together. Yeah, I'm excited about it. And if you could share the survey with anyone that you think would be interested, if you add your email as an artist, then we'll send you the brief so that you can consider whether any project that you might have would be relevant to you. And a big issue that we're starting to think about is the spaces that people might be able to use.
Yeah.
So we're starting to have conversations with theatres and spaces in London and in Bristol about what's possible. And I sort of thought it'd be a nightmare, and I thought it'd be like, well, you know, I don't have the insurance and I don't have any other people, but actually that feels quite possible. But one of the issues is that theatre lighting looks really crap on 360 video. So you might have your lighting plan and then you just like up it by 30% to make it look good on camera. Apparently, you know, outdoors is the best kind of lighting that you'll get for 360 camera, maybe like most cameras. So yeah.
And what do you feel about I guess European touring? You know, is like the Brexit. Yeah,
I think that I wonder whether you're more likely to get gigs in Europe than in the UK.
Really?
For next spring? Well, possibly, but
oh yeah.
I mean, one thing, maybe not next spring, maybe the year after, because some people have postponed their programs, so they will run the program that they had for this summer next summer to honour the agreements that they had. You might know more about this, Axel. So I think actually we said 2022 would be when we would be looking at that programming journey being kind of realistic. But you know, theatres in other European countries are opening to small audiences already, and if we don't know which theatres are going to survive, we don't know which spaces are going to be open, in which capacity they might be open. You know, it might be by the end of next year that this all feels like a sort of weird nightmare blip that happened and everything's back on track. But I think a lot of the large organisations are going to really, really struggle to, well, they're not going to be getting their income, and the capacity of audiences that they can get into their spaces are going to be so diminished, and the safety measures around running those spaces, you know, as soon as a staff member tests positive for COVID-19, they need to shut the building for 2 weeks, possibly. So, you know, I'm not as up to date on what's happening with venues, but I think it's, you know, I understand it's very difficult, but I think there's a sense that if you are sharing as widely as possible around Europe and the world, then the programmers who are interested in your work, you will reach more of them. And I think that there will be countries in the world that are more able to program than others. But I'm not sure. I think that's something we need to sense check a bit more. What do you think about that, Axa? What are you finding with companies?
So yeah, I'm Axel. I'm an independent producer, and I do tour booking for a couple of companies at the moment. Alice, it's really hard because, as you said, the most venues I'm talking to in Europe, they're just postponing their 2020 program to next year. So they're not looking at anything new for now, except to fill the odd gaps because such and such company is not available anymore for some reason. So yeah, I feel like at the moment I can't do my work actually because 2022 is too far away, and most venues are concerned about what's going to happen tomorrow. So yeah, I find it difficult, and nobody really knows when we can travel again, which formats shows will take. I know I have some venues who in France, we were supposed to perform one time in the spring. Now they want to book 2 shows for next year so that they can have socially distanced audience members.
Yeah.
But obviously they want the second show for close to nothing because the box office stays the same.
So being asked to do a show twice for the same fee as one because the box office is the same.
Yes, so that's very cheeky, and I'm pushing very hard against that, obviously. But if it's a deal breaker, then what can we do? We still need, I guess, one fee is better than 0, so we still go ahead. So I think everybody is struggling a little bit at the moment to find out what's the best situation and what can they do.
But I think whatever the situation is, keeping up to date, programmers keeping up to date with what artists are up to.
Yeah.
Without the pressure of having to be creating anything. But so I know people who had just made a new show and were really looking forward to showcasing it this spring, and obviously that hasn't happened. So they've got they've got nowhere to share that at the moment. Sorry, I realised we didn't do hellos. I just kind of assumed. You want to unmute yourselves and just introduce yourselves quickly. Ella, I don't think we've met, but I think I've met everyone else. Hi, Ella.
Yeah, my name's Ella. I know Sherry actually.
I know. It's like nice to see you.
Yeah, and I've met Axel before as well. So my background is dance and yoga, and circus. I started Silks actually in Brazil, and then I trained with Vicky with her apprentice scheme. And I'm currently making a solo, which is kind of really using my dance background and some silks. So that's why I'm here, and I'm super interested in kind of this. How do we keep the scene alive? How do we keep things alive? And especially with Brexit, how do we keep and stay connected on a bigger scale as well? Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Axel, I think you've introduced yourself. Sherry, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Sherry, and I'm a freelance producer. And when I'm not on furlough, I'm the exec director for Upswing with Vicky doing Camille. Lots of people know Camille. I'm Camille's maternity cover, but that's not me at the moment because I'm furloughed. We're all furloughed actually. So, but yeah, so we're quite interested in all these things about keeping the sector moving and how people's work can get seen, exactly what Ella was saying.
Bex?
Hi everyone, I'm based up in Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm a director, scenographer working with movement, circus and dance, and the digital, kind of creating digital worlds but in physical spaces usually. And yeah, just looking, kind of adapting as going. I have quite a few projects. One that was just about to tour Scotland, our first kind of 12-date tour, which everything's been postponed, and then some other things just beginning, and just, yeah, like I mentioned, looking at ways to keep the dialogue with the artists that I work with going, so keeping our research happening, and looking how to transplant some of those ideas into different platforms, whether it be radio or music videos, or this kind of thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Amy, do you want to unmute yourself and just say hi?
Hi. I run Lavrak with Nix, who is in another room at the moment. But we're in a kind of funny place in that we were just about to start doing our first international work. So in a way, this is maybe good timing for us, because instead of relearning how it all works, we can kind of move with it. But yeah, so we've just received some emergency funding from ACE, and we were in a similar position to you, Bex, in that we're kind of in the R&D stages of a new show. So we're just kind of carrying that on, but in some kind of digital way, and then working out kind of what to do with the work and how to proceed. So yeah, so this is really interesting, because we're kind of like still looking at international avenues and what's possible and what's not possible at the moment.
Great.
Kate, I have a question about,
Yeah.
So can you talk about who the users are going to be of the app, and how you envision that getting disseminated? And
so yeah, so first of all, I don't think it's going to be like an app. I don't think we're going to make a platform in that sense. I think there's going to be, I think what we need to use is already there, whether it's YouTube or Vimeo, whatever. But I think it will be a way that people come together to be, as far as we're imagining at the moment, that you have a kind of presentation that everyone's part of, and then everyone sees the show, and then afterwards there'll be a bit of time, and then a Q&A, which is what we're thinking at the moment. One of the things we are trying to work out is how you could create a sense of connection possibly during the show, because it's such a cold thing to perform just for a camera. Hopefully we have a few people in the audience, so that you have a kind of test audience, because that makes a big difference. But we're trying to look into maybe a way that, programmers who can watch can feedback in some way, maybe live. We're not sure, we're looking into that. The users will be, part of the survey is to try and get some profile for the project and get people interested, so the programmers who are putting their emails into the survey will be kept up to date with the show. Like I mentioned before, I'm not sure whether I assume that we will want to tailor the reach to programmers for each show. So we'll need to look into that. If I need to reach out to other, networks that I'm not necessarily a part of, for example, outdoor arts, then I'll do that. That's kind of our part of the bargain, is that we bring in useful people. And I'm in touch with Circus Strada mainly about that, and we'll be having some conversations with their members about how best they can, how they might feed into it and get involved with it. I spoke with as part of one of these webinar things with Mike Rabauta from Torrega the other day, and they're thinking very much about, because Torrega is an outdoor festival with lots of outdoor and circus, but it's a big showcase. So they're trying to think about how they can provide that profile and exposure for their artists without the actual outdoor event going on. So there's lots of this kind of thinking going on, I think. And yeah, we will do our best to reach the best people. But it's also, I think it's got to be clear that it's an R&D. So actually it might be that the learning that comes out of it is the most valuable thing. And if we can just share that learning to people and say, this is what we did, this is what worked, this is what didn't. So it's quite risky possibly for the artists involved. But, normally you do so much work to try and get programmers to your show, and you're lucky if one or two of them come. Like, it's such
totally.
Yeah.
I know as a programmer that I want to go to more, and if I could, I would pay 50 quid to sit. And I've had stuff streamed to me before live, and it was such a joy just to be able to sit on my sofa and watch something in London that I wouldn't have programmed anyway, and just know that it's great that I saw it, that it's great that I know that I don't have to keep on considering it. And so if we can get, 5 programmers to watch a show, I think that would be a win. Ideally, it would be more. But yeah, that's what we'll be working on. And once we know what those projects are, we'll start gathering the programming audience for each. We've also got a group of producers who are doing a sort of interesting, it was going to be in Belgium, Producers Academy thing, and I think we'll invite them along because they're thinking about showcasing and sharing in quite a sort of deep way, so that there might be other people who are watching who are not just programmers, as long as that's okay with the artists. It might be other artists who want to watch it to understand what the experience is like, but each of the companies will have to be okay with that. I don't want it to be a showcasing is so risky in that way anyway. If you're showcasing something that's not ready, and that it's about the expectations have to be at the right level. It has to be very clear to the audience, to the programmers, whether they're watching something that's in very early development, that something's quite finished, or something that's completely ready to go. Because if you show something that people expect to be ready that isn't ready, it's a first impressions thing, and it's very difficult to go back from that. So I'm really keen to strip out as much risk as possible, but still put on something that, you know, that is quite brave and productive for everyone.
And do you feel that, I mean, touring international work, I mean, we've just started touring Void, which was a dance AV piece, which was, we designed and created that show with the thought of it's going to tour, so we're going to make it a one-person show with a set that can just go up, and it's just lit by video, and you know, it's fairly easy. And even that, you know, like we had some gigs over in like Milan and over in San Francisco, and like people just haven't got the money to tour stuff, or like you know, and this is something that was an award-winning show that we made super small, and I'm just like, okay, so do I need to rethink this again? Like, how do you make some, you know, when you're designing something from the ground up, which is kind of how I work, like scenographically with the performance and things, you know, what are people after? Like, you know, I want something to live, basically, not just be a one-off, which is what I'm used to.
Was that people not able to afford it before the virus?
Yeah. You know, you like, and even that's us, you know, this is big international art festivals, you know, or the, you know, San Francisco International Art Festival, for instance, you know, and it's, I guess America's different in terms of its touring landscape. And, you know, we were kind of, Creative Scotland is a really great arts organisation and like offers lots of kind of onward touring things and, you know, this kind of thing. And it's really trying to find that balance of creating a piece of work that's edgy and desirable and what the artist really wants to make, but also being really practical with logistics. I just wondered if there's any advice that you guys being producers and programmers outside of my circle have.
I think it's really hard. I think touring has been, I wouldn't say broken, but I think it's very hard.
Yeah.
And it's not, I think it's not something I've been very involved with encouraging people to get into doing, because I think it's very hard. But there are definitely things you can do to make your show more bookable. But it sounds like you've done them, and that was a great show. It sold out in Bristol. Yeah, I don't know, but, you know, more exposure, tour bookers who have really good contacts with venues. It's such a mission, tour booking. I did it a few times, and I don't really do it anymore because I think it's really hard. But I think a lot of it is about building up relationships with organisations and venues, which is it's quite a long-term journey.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Axel?
Yes, I haven't seen your show, so it's really hard to give, you know, precise advice or anything. But also, there's something around expectation of artists sometimes. Because it depends, you know, what you had in mind. If you wanted to do, I don't know, 50 gigs or 20. Because often I found, especially with smaller shows, it's really, really hard to have a show that actually gonna please everybody. You know, when you have those big Seika shows or Seven Fingers, I feel like that's easy because it's a big wow effect and all of that. That's a different sector. When you make a smaller show, it's great for touring, definitely. But at the same time, you're taking a risk of not pleasing everyone. And maybe your show is not meant to be seen. by or to be presented in 50 venues in each country, and that's absolutely fine too. I know I work with Nick and JD. They've done really, really well in England. They're doing all right in France, and there's some places where it's just not working. And they've performed once, and that's it. And I've tried to push a little bit, and it's just not working. And so we move on to the next one. But it's a very complicated scene, and to booking is complicated.
What do you think, Amy? You did a great tour for your last show. But I know you worked really hard on it. What did you learn?
This is interesting because we've been having this conversation a lot recently. That was our first kind of high production value tour, and we created the show and with touring in mind, but having never toured anything such big production. So we had big bits of set, we had lots of rigging, we had to travel around in 2 vans, sometimes 3 cars depending on the venue, because then to get up all the rigging, so it was quite. And then we kind of straddle the dance sector as well, because we involve a lot of dance in our work. And so a lot of the venues that were interested didn't have the capabilities to rig counterweighted aerial, because you need so much height and you need the ability to be able to rig and all of the rest of it. So that was a bit of a struggle, I think. And that's what we learned from that is like, okay, so we want to make a smaller scale show now. We want to keep production value, and it was brilliant, and I would do it again. But we kind of left thinking, okay, well, maybe we can make a show that can tour to some of these, maybe some of these smaller venues that are interested, or some of these venues with less height. And it means that we don't need so many vans, and that brings the cost down. But it's just, so that's what we're creating at the moment, and it's the kind of battle between trying to keep the production value high and trying to keep it like spectacle and keep it exciting, but still kind of with less stuff. We're experimenting with a Zorb ball, because it deflates and then you can back it away. So yeah, we're experimenting with kind of new equipment and using bungees. So it's still aerial and it's still got the kind of visual that we want, but you need so much less height, and we can actually rig it ourselves, so we don't need a rigger, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the stage that we're at with it at the moment.
I love that inflatable circus.
Yeah,
literally just like in a box, like.
Yeah,
and socially distant because of the Zorb ball.
Yeah,
we had a proposal for Glastonbury, which was like a person dressed as a hamster in a Zorb ball going around like one of those hamster things. We thought it was great, but we just sort of think how hot the hamster would get, and that was kind of before the virus, but at least there would be very socially distanced. I love it.
Yeah, we were talking about this. We started making this before the virus, and then we thought there's going to be a lot of connotation, a lot of people interpreting it as something to do with COVID-19, having one person in a Zorb ball and one person not in a Zorb ball. So we're kind of working out what to do with that, whether to play on it or kind of try and steer away from it.
We've just got 10 more minutes. I think there's so much to be said about touring and so much to learn from people who have been through it. But yeah, talking about ways of sharing new work and showcasing. I don't know if there's kind of anything anyone else really wants to say. I think, once I would love to see what shows were going to go up to Edinburgh and see what kind of, what avenues might be available to people this year to be able to share work, if there are any. I don't know if people are just, sharing films, but then I guess they don't really know where to send them, and who is booking, because nobody knows when they will be booking. I think quite. Oh yeah, sorry, Axel. Yeah.
Myself. Just what you were saying about showcasing, I just want to share a couple of experiences I've had from the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing tour booking for Gandini Juggling.
Gandini. Yeah.
Yeah, we were supposed to be part of competition / showcase in Paris called Danse Élargie. And we were super proud to be part of it. It's a very fancy venue. But obviously they had to cancel it.
Yeah.
But what they're doing now, they haven't started yet, but they're going to do online showcase. So they're not going to do like live presentation or videos of what the showcase could have looked like, but they're going to do some video things. So I'm quite curious to see what it's going to look like and if it's going to have any impacts on the life of the show, or if it's complete. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with that. So maybe something like keeping an eye on them, see how they do it. And there's also a couple of big showcases that's coming up in the autumn. There's CINAS in November and in Canada, and the Circa in Auch in France in October. I think both of them are still planning to go ahead now, but they've already given warnings that they might not be able to go ahead as planned. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do, and if they're going to change the format or cancel or postpone now.
Circus Start in Belgium very quickly turned around from their festival being cancelled to taking the artists who were going to be showcasing at the festival online. They did a speed dating and a pitching, and you went into different rooms and met them. And I think I was really, I wasn't part of it, I didn't hear about it in time, but I was really impressed with the quick turnaround and the idea that those relationships with programmers were still being built on. And it's Tohu in Canada. Is that the same as CINAS, or that is CINAS?
No, it's different. Yeah.
So I know Ruth at Tohu is looking at continuing with their showcase and marketplace, I think they call it, but that being more about keeping the conversation between programmers and artists live, artists pitching more ideas and then talking them through, so it not being about sharing work ready to tour, because maybe that's just too early. I think that's at the end of this year. So yeah, I think you'll find a lot of organizations finding ways of still showcasing and representing artists and keeping those avenues open. So it might be that what we're working on is only really useful for kind of sharing very new work because the other work is being done, but then the showcasing isn't happening in the UK. I did speak to Flora, who runs Canvas, about what her whether she had any sort of plans to be running something online this year, and I don't think she does, but we're in conversation, so I'll share the findings of the survey with her, and if that sparks any sort of thinking about Canvas activity for this year or next year, that'd be really interesting to know. Yeah, go Amy.
I have a question, I guess, about kind of the developing relationships element of showcasing with programmers, in that that was kind of something that we were like halfway through, and obviously with traveling, even when we kind of can still be having shows and stuff, traveling is going to be expensive and tricky. How do you think is the best way to kind of develop relationships with programmers internationally, I guess, is my question.
Yeah,
sorry, it's a hard question.
It's such a big question. I mean, you know, it's such a big question. I know companies who their work isn't great, but they're great at chatting. You know, they're great at, you know, they know everyone and they're constantly sort of, you know, networking, and they get work kind of like that. And then there are those shows that are brilliant shows, and you don't even really know the artists. They're you know, they're kind of more introverted people who don't work like that. I just think it's a mix between getting people to see your work and already have heard your name a few times, and then getting recommended through other people. You know, I look at other festivals lineups quite a lot, and just know that if that they've taken a punt on it, then I would be more likely to do so. But it's such a big tour booking and promoting shows is such a big world, and it's not really something I have much advice for. I think maybe Sherry does. What I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it is about relationships. I was reflecting on what we were saying earlier about touring and the costs of touring. So Ella and I met in the dance world, and before I worked in producing the dance world, I worked in opera, in middle scale opera, not big, large scale opera, middle scale, small touring. And the previous show I did before going to that world, we toured with 14 performers, 28 orchestra members, a full set, a dog, and student choruses, young people choruses. In every venue we went to, we had a teenage girls chorus and children's chorus. It was like 70 people in every production. And then I came into the dance world, and you toured with the dancers, the music on one CD, the light plot on a CD-ROM, and a stage manager who carried the costumes, which were tiny because they were dancers, in a garment bag. It was such a different world, but it's really driven by the artistry of it. I mean, that's the thing. With dancers, it's about the bodies. We were working with Russell Mellifant, and it's all about Russell's design and Michael Hull's lighting. It's so much about the lighting, and what was on that CD-ROM with the light plot drove the work. And I think with circus, it's about your bodies and what you make. And so the costs, I think it's about, it's hard. I mean, the costs, it's the travel and the visas and all of that. But I think it's about being able to express your vision, and however this world becomes of the digital world. I mean, I thought it was really interesting, Kate, you were talking about what you're not looking for is for people to have made a beautiful video, like a trailer, to share. You really want to see the raw work and the ideas, and it's about being able to communicate those ideas to as many people as you can. So I don't know if that's...
Can I jump on that? Because it was quite...
I'm just going to say, I think we've got like 1 more minute. Sorry. But yes, Ella.
So yeah, because we're in this time where we don't know when we're, like I was actually working on a group show and have evolved into, okay, right now, what I can do is I can go back to this solo idea and develop this solo. But, in terms of what I can make in the space that I'm in right now, and then in terms of when will I be able to apply for funding, there's so many issues in terms of this presenting to promoters, presenting to others, where for me, I feel like what I have is my ideas. And, I actually do have kind of like because I've done some R&Ds on this idea, so I've got some bits of footage, but it's such a different space, that to the old world, because there's so much we don't know. And so I feel like, kind of linking back to what Amy was saying about this, how do we get out there with our work? I do feel like now talking is really important, because there's so many factors that we don't have access to, and we can't rely on anymore. Yeah.
Do you not think that kind of touring in England and Scotland and Wales... Oh, sorry, I shouldn't...
No, it's fine.
We've been given 5 minutes extra.
Minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, in Scotland, that's kind of what I'm more used to, is the kind of the touring fund, which is twice a year now. It's changed. So it's not an ongoing thing. We were really lucky to kind of be a recipient of that last year. So we've got this 12-date tour, and we're kind of really hitting schools, community halls, gyms, as well as theatres, because the piece is really about tweens getting together, getting young teenagers and trying to collaborate with other organizations and institutions who have access to younger people. And I kind of feel this is where we're going to have to start making our work fit into, which is gym halls, community centres, churches, you know, just really thinking outside the box to collaborate, to help facilitate each other. And I'm just wondering, you know, the touring landscape of the UK is going to change, and hopefully people, obviously art is really integral in well-being and mental health, and, you know, bringing the collective together. And I just really hope that the Arts Council is going to see that and really kind of find more initiatives, whether it be outdoors or, you know, more work that's made for schools, for instance. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just seeing the positive potentially of where things are going to have to shift. And as artists, we kind of need to follow the currents with it. That's how I feel.
So that's similar to the thinking that we're doing around Circus City Festival. You know, where can we do it, and what will people be able to do? What can audiences do? It's so unknown, but I think I actually feel quite hopeful about it. I feel like to have a moment of activity and celebration in the city that might be outdoors. It might be circus for screen and like a cycling cinema type things.
Nice.
You know, yeah, like you're saying, maybe focus on schools and take something around schools or community centres instead. So I think hopefully, and I know Greenwich and Docklands are looking at going ahead with their festival and doing it in a very different way, or just seeing what is possible and asking people to change how they work a bit. So I think hopefully there are bodies that can still exist, like a festival, that can be flexible and can expand and contract. It's very difficult because the box office will be either completely unreliable or non-existent, I think, or maybe it will be fine. But it's, you know, it's the venues, isn't it? It's keeping those massive or not so massive organizations running, because once you mothball somewhere, once you close it, it's so expensive to get it up and running again. So that's, yeah, I think artists will need to respond to a landscape with less venues, and festivals and programmers and promoters will as well.
Yeah, I like for say, you know, for myself as a director, I kind of come up with concepts, you know, that's what I do, and then I work with a producer and we build the application around that. So, you know, having a concept or an idea, a blueprint of an idea, whether it's blue sky, you know, it can be fairly open in terms of how it's presented, you know, if there's the meat of the idea there. So it's, for me, I'm kind of like looking for ways to work with, I don't know, Greenwich and Docklands to say, this is the idea, how can you help me bring this to life under your specific regulations, or, you know, how your audiences are going to see it, you know. So it's almost a little bit more collaborative in a way, potentially, between the artist and the institution, maybe, you know, especially if we have 2 years or 18 months to develop that, you know.
And I think,
Yeah,
Kate, have we lost you?
Yeah.
I actually heard bird song.
Yeah. Oh, we're shutting in 20. Is everyone else getting these things? We've got 26 seconds.
Yes. Good.
Thank you so much. Please share the survey. Fill it out.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
Nice to talk to you, Ellen, Axel, and Amy.
It's great to see you, Ella.
Great to see you, Sherry.
I'll see you back in the main room in a moment. 7, 6.
Oh, we're going.
Anywhere. I don't think we're quite all back. Brilliant. That's us. I think that's everyone. Yes. Brilliant.
Cool. So now is the moment that you can, if there's anybody from one of the breakout groups that wants to share a little bit about the conversation that they were having. Doesn't have to be a complete fly through synopsis, but anything that really struck you, anything that you're kind of taking away with you that you want to share with the group. Try and keep it brief if you can.